I was just trying to get my shoes off when my aunt cornered me to gossip about my job situation. Hours later, my cousin's arrogant fiancé smirked that I couldn't even get past security at his dream job. So I stood up, grabbed my jacket, and told him, "I'm the CEO. See you Monday." This is where the story truly begins, and you won't want to miss what happens. Make sure you're subscribed to see it through to the end. We're always curious. Where in the world are you all watching from today? Let us know in the comments. The doorbell's chime cut through the silence of my car like a surgeon's scalpel. I didn't move. For a full minute, I just sat in the driveway, staring at the cheerful, over-decorated front door of my Aunt Susan's house. Every light was on, and I could hear the dull thud of music and the high-pitched shriek of laughter from inside. It was supposed to be a celebration. My cousin Chloe was engaged, and this was the official family dinner. I should have been happy to be there. Instead, I felt a weariness so profound it settled in my bones. The last 3 months had been a blur of conference rooms, transatlantic flights, and enough caffeine to power a small city. We had just finalized the largest, most complex merger of my career, and the board, in a unanimous decision, had named me CEO of the newly formed entity, NexusScore Analytics. I was 41 years old, exhausted, and at the absolute pinnacle of my career. And I hadn't told a single person in my family. The truth was, the transition had been brutal. It was confidential, high stakes, and required a level of focus I hadn't needed since I first launched my own small data firm over a decade ago. I had been working 80-hour weeks, living out of a suitcase, and subsisting on room service. I'd missed birthdays. I'd let calls go to voicemail. I'd sent curt one-line texts. In meetings, talk soon. Handling a major transition at work. Too busy, sorry. To me, these were necessary sacrifices. To my family, apparently, they were warning signs. My phone buzzed on the passenger seat. A text from Aunt Susan. "Are you here? I see a car." I sighed, killed the engine, and grabbed the ridiculously expensive bottle of champagne from the passenger seat. A peace offering. I walked up the pathway, the sounds of the party growing louder, and rang the bell. The door flew open. It wasn't my aunt, but my cousin Chloe, phone in hand, already filming. "She's here. Amelia, you made it. We thought you'd fallen off the earth." "Hi, Chloe. Congratulations," I said, trying to muster a smile as I stepped into the chaotic warmth of the entryway. "Shoes off," she chirped, gesturing to a pile of footwear by the door. I was still bent over, balancing on one foot while trying to untie the knot on my boot, when Aunt Susan descended on me. She didn't hug me. She didn't say hello. She leaned in, her voice a conspiratorial, pitying whisper that was somehow louder than the music. "Amelia, darling," she said, her eyes flicking around the hall. "So glad you could come. Now listen, maybe don't bring up your, job situation tonight. It'll just depress the kids. It's a party after all." I froze, one boot half off, my back aching from the posture. I slowly straightened up. My job situation. Aunt Susan patted my arm, her face a mask of patronizing sympathy. "It's nothing to be ashamed of, dear. These tech layoffs are just awful. I'm sure you'll land on your feet. You're a smart girl. You just aimed a little too high, maybe." I stared at her, the champagne bottle suddenly feeling like a lead weight in my hand. They thought I'd been fired. My 80-hour weeks, the merger, the CEO title, they had interpreted my silence as the shame of failure. They thought I was unemployed. "Oh," I said. It was the only word that came out. "Now come on," she said, practically yanking me by the elbow. "Go get a drink, try to have some fun. Chloe is just thrilled about her new ring." I just smiled. It was a tight, brittle thing that didn't reach my eyes. I placed my boots neatly on the mat and took a seat on the edge of the living room sofa, a ghost at my own family's party. The betrayal of their assumption, so quick and so complete, felt colder than the November air outside. I nursed a club soda, watching the party swirl around me. The living room was packed. Chloe, 28 and perpetually online, was holding court by the fireplace, flashing her new diamond ring while her friends filmed her reactions. She was a social media manager, or, as she preferred, a brand strategist, and her entire life was curated content. Her fiancé, Bryce, was at her side, his arm possessively around her waist. He was 29, with the slicked-back hair and overly confident posture of a man who had just discovered his first, winning stock. I felt a familiar pang of isolation. This was my family, but I had never quite fit. My parents had passed away when I was in college, leaving me a small inheritance I'd used to pay for my degree and later to found my first company. While my cousins were going to football games, I was writing code. While they were getting married and having kids, I was securing venture capital. My success was quiet, built in server rooms and boardrooms, not posted on Instagram. They didn't understand my world, and they had clearly decided to write their own narrative for it. "Amelia, you're so quiet over there," Aunt Susan called out, making a grand gesture. "Come, talk to Bryce, he's in your line of work." I felt a dozen pairs of eyes turn to me, all no doubt primed with the story of poor Amelia, the failed tech executive. I plastered on my smile and walked over. "Bryce, right? Congratulations on the engagement," I said, extending a hand. He didn't shake it. He was holding a beer and just sort of lifted it in a toast, his eyes scanning me from head to toe. "Thanks. Amelia, you're Chloe's cousin, the tech one, right?" "Something like that," I said. "Tough market out there," he said, his tone dripping with faux sympathy. "Heard the bubble finally burst for a lot of those smaller firms. Brutal." "It can be," I agreed, my voice neutral. "Bryce is doing amazingly," Chloe jumped in, stroking his lapel. "He's a senior data analyst at his firm. Senior." "That's great, Bryce," I said. I was genuinely happy for him if he was good at what he did. A rising tide lifts all boats. "Yeah, well, I'm not planning on staying there," he said, puffing out his chest. "I'm aiming higher, much higher." He leaned in, as if sharing a secret. "I'm in the final round of interviews at NexusScore Analytics." My blood went still. NexusScore, my company. The company whose new letterhead, sitting in a box in my home office, listed my name at the very top. "Oh, really?" I said, keeping my voice light. "NexusScore, I've heard of them, elite firm." "Elite doesn't even begin to cover it," Bryce scoffed. "They're impenetrable, they only take the absolute best. They're handling analytics for, well, I probably can't even say. NDAs, you know." I nodded slowly. I knew all about the NDAs. I had drafted half of them. "It's been a grueling process," he continued, clearly enjoying the spotlight. 6 rounds of interviews, psychological profiling, a practical exam. Most people wash out before they even get a phone screen. But you know, he shrugged, trying to look modest, and failed spectacularly. "They like what they see." "I'm sure they do," I said. An idea, small and sharp, was beginning to form in my mind. "When's your final interview?" "Monday," he said, beaming. 9 a.m. sharp, with the new executive team. They're flying in just to meet me, apparently." "They are they?" I said. This was news to me. My calendar for Monday morning said 9:00 a.m., final interview B. Keller's data analyst candidate. Bryce Kellers, this was Bryce. My internal thoughts crystallized, no longer a vague idea but a hard, clear plan. They had forgotten one crucial thing. They saw me as a failure, a cast-off. They had forgotten who I was, what I had built, and what I was capable of. They had forgotten that in my world, information was everything. "Well, Bryce," I said, raising my club soda. "Good luck, I hope it works out for you." "Thanks," he said, already turning back to his adoring audience. "But I don't really need luck. When you've got the talent, you make your own." I just smiled and faded back into the shadows of the room, the plan settling comfortably into place. The rest of the dinner was a master class in passive-aggressive pity. Aunt Susan insisted I take the most comfortable chair, the one with the lumpy cushion, as if I were an invalid. She kept piling food onto my plate, saying, "Eat up, Amelia. You need to keep your strength. You look so stressed." Every comment was a paper cut. Every look was steeped in condescension. They were treating me like a charity case, and the worst part was, they seemed to be enjoying it. My failure made their own mediocre successes shine brighter. Chloe's Instagram following and Bryce's senior, analyst job felt more significant when compared to my supposed flameout. I thought back to all the years I had supported this family. It wasn't just about money, though there was that. I'd paid for Aunt Susan's realtor certification classes. I'd quietly covered the down payment on Chloe's first condo when she'd complained about rent, framing it as a family investment. I'd hosted Thanksgiving every year at my large, empty house because they loved the space. I'd mentored Chloe's friends, written letters of recommendation, and co-signed a car loan for an uncle. My entire adult life, I had been the family's quiet, reliable safety net. The moment I went dark for 3 months to handle the single biggest challenge of my career, they hadn't given me the benefit of the doubt. They hadn't called to ask if I was okay. They had jumped to the most most dramatic conclusion possible. I was finished. And now they were pitying me for it. The main course was cleared, and Aunt Susan brought out a cheesecake. This was Bryce's cue to resume his performance. "You know, the real problem with the tech industry," he announced, tapping his fork on his plate, "is all the dead weight. People who got in early, got lucky, and then just coasted. The new generation, my generation, we're all about disruption. We're lean, we're agile, we don't wait for a handout." He looked directly at me. "Bryce is so right," Chloe gushed, hanging on his arm. "He works so hard. He's always reading like business books. He told me that Nexus Score is planning a huge restructuring. They're clearing out all the old management, all the people who can't keep up." "It's true," Bryce said, nodding sagely. "The new CEO, whoever they are, is supposed to be a total shark, firing half the legacy staff from the merger. That's why they want me. They need fresh blood, people who actually understand the new data paradigms." I took a small bite of cheesecake. It tasted like ash. Bryce was, of course, completely wrong. The merger was about integration, not elimination. We were expanding our teams. The shark CEO me was currently finalizing a benefits package that was the most generous in the industry, precisely to retain our legacy staff, whose expertise was invaluable. The fresh blood he was talking about was meant to supplement, not replace. He was just repeating buzzwords he'd read in a blog post, trying to sound important. And he was using this fantasy to paint me as obsolete. "He's just so brilliant," Aunt Susan sighed, her eyes practically sparkling at her future nephew-in-law. "It's so wonderful that Chloe found someone so ambitious, so secure." The implication hung in the air, thick and suffocating, unlike Amelia. Bryce, who I now recognized as the primary antagonist of my evening, wasn't just arrogant. He was deliberately cruel. He wasn't just trying to build himself up. He was trying to do it by standing on my perceived grave. He wasn't just a blowhard. He was a vulture. He leaned across the table, his smile all teeth. "Don't worry, Amelia. I'm sure there's still a place for people with your experience. Maybe in consulting or a community college, you could teach maybe." I looked at him, really looked at him. He was a perfect specimen of mediocre confidence. He wasn't brilliant. He was just loud. He had a mid-level job at a no-name firm and had somehow bluffed his way into a final interview at my company. He had no idea what new data paradigms meant. He was a script reader, not a strategist. "Thank you, Bryce," I said, my voice perfectly even. "I'll keep that in mind. Teaching sounds fulfilling." He sat back, smug, clearly believing he had won the exchange. He thought he was the shark. He had no idea he was the minnow, and he was swimming in my ocean. My phone vibrated in my pocket. A text from my new COO. "Final prep for Monday 9 a.m., candidate file attached." I glanced at the text, then back at Bryce, who was now telling a loud, boring story about his golf swing. The trap wasn't just set. The bait was in my hand. The drive home was quiet. The anger and hurt from the party had cooled into a hard, dense core of resolve. The passive victim who had sat on the couch and accepted their pity was gone. The CEO was back in control. I walked into my dark, silent house, flipped on the lights in my home office, and sat down at my desk. My monitors glowed to life. "Okay, Bryce Kellers," I whispered to the screen. "Let's see who you really are." I opened the text from my COO and downloaded the candidate file. Bryce's resume was impressive on paper. He'd graduated with honors. He had all the right certifications. His current title of Senior Data Analyst was prominently displayed. His cover letter was a masterpiece of corporate buzzwords, hitting every single keyword we looked for: synergy, scalability, proactive, data-driven. But something felt off. He claimed expertise in 3 proprietary analytics models, 2 of which were brand new and highly complex. My own teams were still getting up to speed on them. For a mid-level analyst at a competitor to have mastery of them was unlikely. This was no longer just a family spat. This was a professional concern. He was coming in for a high-level interview on Monday, and I was the one who would make the final call. My leverage wasn't just the truth, it was the entire apparatus of my company. I spent the first hour of my investigation doing what I did best: analyzing data. I ran a background check, not a casual Google search, but a full, top-tier corporate check, the kind we run on all executive-level hires. The first red flag appeared at 1:15 a.m. His previous job, which he claimed he'd left for a better opportunity, had an addendum. He hadn't just left, he had been separated by mutual agreement. Corporate code for fired under threat of legal action. I dug deeper. I used my access to professional networks and cross-referenced his employment dates. He had a 6-month gap on his resume that he had covered by extending the dates of 2 other jobs. Then I looked at his university credentials. He had graduated with honors, but his degree was in business administration, not computer science or data analytics, as he had implied. He had taken a few certification courses, but he hadn't actually passed the final exams for the advanced ones. The Bryce on paper was a high-performance star. The real Bryce was a carefully constructed lie. The clever trap didn't even need to be set. He was walking right into it. He believed he was coming in on Monday to dazzle a few executives with his buzzwords. He had no idea he was walking into a final exam with the principal. And I had the answer key to his entire life. I spent the next 2 days, the rest of my weekend, preparing, but I wasn't preparing for the dinner. I was preparing for the interview. I pulled his original application, his practical exam submissions, and all the notes from his previous 5 interview rounds. His practical exam was decent. He knew the basics, but he'd clearly hit a wall on the more complex problems, and his written explanations were vague and relied heavily on jargon to mask a lack of true understanding. He had been passed along by junior HR managers who were impressed by his confidence and his keyword-stuffed resume. He had never faced a true expert. He had never faced someone who couldn't be bluffed. On Sunday night, my phone rang. It was Aunt Susan. "Amelia, dear," she said, her voice syrupy. "I'm just calling to check on you. You left so abruptly last night. Are you feeling all right? I know it must have been hard seeing Bryce be so successful. It's a painful reminder of, well, you know." "I'm fine, Aunt Susan," I said, looking at the spreadsheet on my screen detailing Bryce's resume inconsistencies. "I just had a long week." "Of course, dear. Well, I just wanted to let you know. Bryce was so sweet after you left. He told me that if his new job at Nexuscore works out, he might be able to pull some strings and get you an interview. Maybe for an administrative assistant, something to tide you over." My hand tightened on my phone. "An administrative assistant," I repeated, my voice flat. "Yes, isn't that thoughtful? He's such a good man. He really understands the importance of helping. Well, the less fortunate. He said you shouldn't get your hopes up, as they really don't like hiring people who have been, you know, let go. But he's willing to try." The audacity was breathtaking. He wasn't just lying on his resume. He was using his fabricated success to humiliate me, to cement my new, lowly position in the family hierarchy. "That's very thoughtful of him, Aunt Susan," I said. "You know I have to go. I have a very big day tomorrow. Lots to prepare for." "Oh, an interview?" she asked, her voice alight with fresh gossip. "You could say that," I said. A very, very important meeting at 9 a.m. Talk to you soon. I hung up before she could reply. The shift from victim to strategist was complete. This was no longer about family drama. It was about professional integrity. Bryce Kellers wasn't just an arrogant fiancé. He was a fraud, and he was trying to lie his way into my company. The clock on the wall of the 40th floor conference room read 8:55 a.m. The room was silent, the only sound the faint hum of the city below. My chief operating officer, David, and my head of HR, Maria, sat opposite me at the long, polished glass table. "Are you sure about this, Amelia?" Maria asked, tapping her pen. "He passed 5 rounds. He's confident." "He's a con artist," I said, not looking up from the file in front of me. "His resume is fiction, and his practical exam was C-level work disguised with a level confidence. He's exactly the kind of dead weight he pretends to despise." "So, how do you want to play this?" David asked, a small smile on his face. He knew me well. "He's expecting a getting-to-know-you chat with the new executive team," I said. "Instead, he's getting a technical audit. From me, you two are just here to take notes." At 8:59 a.m., my assistant's voice came over the intercom. "Mr. Kellers is here." "Send him in," I said. The door opened and Bryce Kellers walked in. His suit was expensive. His tie was perfectly knotted. He was the very picture of success. He strode in, hand outstretched, a massive, predatory smile on his face. "Good morning," he boomed. "Bryce Kellers, a real pleasure to meet the—" He stopped, his eyes met mine. His smile didn't just fade, it collapsed. The color drained from his face so fast I was momentarily worried he might faint. He stood frozen in the middle of the room, his hand still awkwardly outstretched. "Amelia," he whispered. "Mr. Kellers," I said, my voice crisp and formal. I didn't stand. I gestured to the empty chair at the far end of the table. "Please take a seat, we have a lot to discuss." He stumbled into the chair, his movements robotic. He looked from me to David, then to Maria, his eyes wide with panic. I don't understand. Chloe, her cousin, what are you doing here?" "I work here," I said calmly. "I'm Amelia Thorne, the Chief Executive Officer of NexusScore Analytics. This is David Chen, our COO, and Maria Flores, our Head of Human Resources. Welcome to your final interview." Bryce's mouth opened and closed silently. He looked like a fish gasping for air. Let's get started," I said, opening the file. "I've been reviewing your resume. It's very ambitious. You claim mastery of the Delta Prime analytics model. As you know, we developed that in-house. It's not public, so I'm curious. How did you learn it?" He stammered, tugging at his collar. "I read the white papers. I'm a fast learner. "The white papers are sealed under our top-tier NDA," I said, my voice hardening. "They have not been released, not even to our partners, so I'll ask again. How did you learn it?" It was a different model. Similar, I must have. Confused the names," he managed, his voice cracking. "Confuse the names," I repeated. "I see. Let's move on to your practical exam. Page 4, your solution for the logistics optimization problem. You used a recursive algorithm here." I pushed the document across the table. "It's an interesting choice, but it's highly inefficient. It would crash our servers in under a minute. Why did you choose it over a standard iterative solution?" He stared at the paper as if it were written in a foreign language. I thought it was more elegant, more disruptive." "It's not disruptive, Mr. Kellers. It's just wrong," I said. "It's the kind of flashy, incorrect answer someone gives when they don't understand the fundamentals of data scaling. Someone who, say, has a degree in business administration, not computer science." The last bit of color drained from his face. How did you?" "Now let's talk about your previous employer," I continued, relentless. "Trans Global Data. You've listed here that you left for a better opportunity. We found it. Odd that you left a senior analyst position to take a 6-month sabbatical before finding your next role." A sabbatical you conveniently forgot to put on your resume. I was traveling, he yelped, his voice high-pitched. I was finding myself. According to our background check, I said, my voice dropping, you were finding yourself in a series of legal mediations after your employer discovered you had falsified your credentials to get the job in the first place. You were fired, Mr. Kellers, and you signed an agreement to never discuss it, in exchange for them not pressing charges. Bryce shot to his feet. You can't prove that. This is harassment. This isn't an interview. It is an interview, I said, my voice like ice. And you failed. You are a fraud, Mr. Kellers. You lied about your education. You lied about your work history. You lied about your expertise. You are not fresh blood. You are a liability, and you have the unmitigated gall to try and lie your way into my company. He stood there, trembling, his facade completely shattered. The arrogant, smug man from the party was gone, replaced by a terrified, cornered boy. Get out, I said, my voice quiet but final. Amelia, please, he whispered, his eyes begging. Chloe, the wedding, this job, please. The interview is over, I said. Maria will validate your parking. Do not list this company on your resume. Do not contact anyone here again. If you do, our legal team will be in touch regarding the fraudulent documents you submitted. Get out. He didn't say another word. He grabbed his briefcase and practically ran from the room. The door clicked shut. David let out a long, low whistle. Well, he said, I guess that's a no on the hire. I leaned back in my chair, the tension finally leaving my shoulders. Maria, please flag his file in the system. Blacklist him. I want an alert if he ever applies to one of our subsidiaries. Done, she said, already typing. Amelia, that was intense. He earned it, I said, but as I looked at the empty chair where he'd been, I didn't feel triumphant. I just felt tired, and I knew the worst part wasn't over. Now, I had to deal with my family. The fallout was immediate. By the time I got home that evening, my phone had 17 missed calls. 15 from Chloe, 2 from Aunt Susan. A wall of text messages had flooded my lock screen. Chloe, what did you do? Chloe, Bryce just came home. He's a mess. Chloe, he said you humiliated him. You set him up. Chloe, you're a horrible person. Chloe, how could you be so jealous? You got fired, S. Oh, you decided to ruin his life? Aunt Susan, Amelia, this is unacceptable. You owe that boy an apology. Chloe, he said you used your old contacts to sabotage him. You're sick. Sick. I silenced my phone and put it on the kitchen counter. I made myself a cup of tea and sat in the quiet of my living room, watching the city lights flicker on. The accusations of jealousy were the most predictable. In their minds, it was the only narrative that made sense. Poor, failed Amelia couldn't stand to see someone else succeed, so she had lashed out. My personal phone started ringing again. This time, I picked it up. What do you want, Chloe? I asked. You. She was sobbing, a full-on, hysterical wail. You ruined everything. Bryce lost the job. That was our future, he said you. You told them lies about him. You're a monster. Chloe, listen to me very carefully, I said, my voice calm and low. I didn't tell them any lies. I just asked him questions about the lies he told. He's a fraud, Chloe. His resume is fake. He was fired from his last job for the same thing. Lies, she shrieked. He told me all about it. He said you were jealous. He said you're just some bitter, washed-up admin who got laid off and can't stand to see him win, he said. He said you probably couldn't even get past security at that company. The phrase hit me like a slap. He had doubled down. He had taken his own humiliation and twisted it, feeding the exact poor Amelia narrative back to my family. He was that desperate, and he was counting on them to believe him over me. He said that, did he? I said. Yes, and I believe him. You've always been jealous of me. Of my life, you have your big, empty house and you're nothing, and I have Bryce, I have love. This was the second confrontation, the one I had been dreading. The one where logic and truth had no place. Chloe wasn't just defending her fiancé, she was defending her entire, carefully curated life. His success was her success. "Chloe, I'm going to tell you the truth, and I don't care if you believe me," I said, my patience gone. I didn't sabotage his interview. I conducted it. I am the CEO of NexusScore Analytics. It's my company. Bryce didn't just not get the job. He was blacklist-level fraudulent. He is a con man, and you are engaged to him. There was a dead silence on the other end of the line. The sobbing stopped. "What?" she whispered. "I am the CEO. The new executive team he was so excited to meet. That was me. The shark cleaning house, me. He walked into my boardroom and he fell apart because his entire professional life is a house of cards." You're lying," she said, but the conviction was gone. Her voice was small. "You're not. You got fired," Aunt Susan said. "Aunt Susan assumed," I corrected her. "You all did. You saw my silence as failure because you can't imagine a world where a woman, especially one in your own family, could be that busy, that focused, or that successful. You all preferred the story where I was a victim because it made you feel better about yourselves." I let the words hang in the air. This wasn't just about Bryce anymore. This was about all of them. "I have the proof, Chloe," I said, my voice softening just a bit. This was still my cousin. "I have the background check. I have the legal settlement from his last employer. I have the record of his failed certification exams. He is lying to you." "Send it," she whispered, her voice trembling. If it's true, send it to me, now." "I will," I said. "But Chloe, what you do with it is up to you. Just know that this is who he is." I hung up. I walked back to my office, compiled the non-confidential parts of the background check, the employment gap, the public record of his degree versus his claims, the lack of certifications, and I bundled them into a single, password-protected file. I sent it to her email with a simple message. "The truth, I'm sorry." I didn't know if she would believe it. I didn't know if she would stay with him, but I had laid my case. The spell of the charming, successful Bryce was broken, shattered by a few simple, irrefutable facts. The rest was up to her. 2 weeks passed in silence. I threw myself back into my work, finalizing the merger, integrating the teams, and trying to forget the toxic mess of the party. I hadn't heard a word from Chloe or Aunt Susan. The text messages had stopped. It was a strange, cold truce. Then I got an invitation. It was a formal, cream-colored card, embossed with gold. "You are cordially invited to celebrate the engagement of Chloe and Bryce." It was for a party that Saturday, at a fancy downtown restaurant. My stomach churned. They were still together. Chloe had seen the proof and had chosen the lie, or, worse, Bryce had somehow convinced her that was fake, too. A handwritten note was at the bottom of the card, in Aunt Susan's loopy script. "Amelia, please come, it would me. Ends so much to Chloe to have all the family there. Let's put that unpleasantness behind us." Unpleasantness, that's what she called it. My failure was gossip, my truth was unpleasantness. I knew exactly what this was. This wasn't an olive branch. It was a public execution. They were going to announce the engagement, Bryce would be at Chloe's side, and my presence would be a signal of my surrender. I would be the sad, lonely cousin, forced to attend and applaud the success of the man I had failed to sabotage. They were building a narrative, and I was being cast as the villain who had seen the error of her ways. I was not going to let that happen. I RSVP'd, yes. Saturday night, I didn't dress like poor Amelia. I wore my CEO armor, a sharp, black designer pantsuit, heels that clicked with authority on the marble floor, and my hair pulled back in a sleek, professional knot. I walked into that private dining room, and the conversation stopped. Aunt Susan, Chloe, and Bryce were at the head of the long table, surrounded by extended family and friends. Bryce was holding a champagne flute, a smug, triumphant smirk back on his face. When he saw me, his smirk widened. He thought I was here to beg forgiveness. "Amelia," Aunt Susan trilled, rushing over, "you look so nice. We're all so glad you came to your senses." "I'm just here to celebrate, Aunt Susan," I said, my voice pleasant. I took a seat, I endured the toasts. I listened to Chloe's friends gush about the ring. I listened to Bryce talk loudly about the toxic work culture at Nexuscore and how he had dodged a bullet. He described the executives as bitter, unqualified, and jealous. He never looked at me, but every word was for me. Finally, after the main course, Aunt Susan stood and tapped her glass. A toast to the happy couple, Chloe and Bryce. We are so thrilled to welcome Bryce into our family. A man of such integrity, such ambition, and such success. We are all so lucky to know him. Everyone clapped. Bryce stood up, kissed Chloe, and raised his glass. Thank you, Susan, and thank you, everyone. It means so much to have your support, especially after the challenges of the past few weeks. As many of you know, I was recently targeted by a very jealous, unstable person. Someone who couldn't stand to see me succeed. But truth and talent always win out. And I'm happy to announce that I've just accepted a senior director position at Omni Group, a true leader in the tech space. My future, our future, has never been brighter. He looked directly at me, his eyes full of malice. This was his checkmate. He had a new, bigger job title. He had my family. I was, in his mind, utterly defeated. I stood up. The room went quiet. I picked up my water glass. I'd like to make a toast too, I said. Bryce's smile faltered. Chloe looked terrified. I'd like to toast to the truth, I said, my voice ringing out in the silent room. Bryce, congratulations on the new job at Omni Group. That's a fantastic company. They're one of our biggest clients. I let that sink in. Bryce is right, I continued, pacing slowly along the table. He was targeted, but not by a jealous person. He was targeted by his own lies. He wasn't headhunted by Omni Group. He was placed. What are you talking about, Amelia? Aunt Susan snapped. Sit down, you're embarrassing yourself. I'm not embarrassed, Auntie, I said. But Bryce should be. You see, after he was removed from my building for resume fraud, I was left with a problem. He was, as you said, family. So I made a call, not to hurt him, but to manage him. I turned to Bryce, whose face was now sheet white. I called the CEO of Omni Group, an old friend of mine. I told him I had a unique candidate, a man with a gift for creative storytelling on his resume. I told him this man was engaged to my cousin, and I would consider it a personal favor if he could find a place for him, a place where he couldn't do any real damage, a place where his senior director title was just words on a business card, with no actual team and no access to sensitive data. I looked at Bryce. I believe the position they created for you is in special projects outreach, which, translated, means you'll be running the company's charity bake sales. Your boss reports to my head of client relations. I get a weekly report on your performance. And your salary? It's being billed to a consulting fee that comes directly out of my company's discretionary account. You don't work for Omni Group, Bryce. You work for me. The room was ice cold. No one moved. You, Bryce stammered, his voice choked. You're welcome, by the way, I said. You wanted a high-paying job at an elite firm, you got it. The only catch is that you actually have to be there every day from 9 to 5. And if you ever lie on a document again, or if you are anything less than perfectly polite to my cousin, that J. Ob and the lovely salary I arranged will disappear. Your career won't just be over. It will be legally and permanently dismantled. I turned to Chloe. Her face was a mask of shock, tears streaming silently down her cheeks. She wasn't looking at me. She was staring at Bryce, seeing him for the first time. She slowly, deliberately pulled the diamond ring off her finger. She didn't throw it. She placed it, very gently, on the table in front of him. We're done, Bryce, she whispered. Then she looked at me, her eyes filled with a devastating mix of shame and gratitude. I put my water glass down. My apologies to the rest of you for the unpleasantness, I said, echoing my aunt's words. Please enjoy the dessert. I grabbed my jacket from the chair. As I walked out of the room, the silence was absolute, broken only by the sound of my heels clicking on the floor. The day after the party, Chloe showed up at my front door. She was alone, wearing sunglasses despite the overcast sky, and holding a small, overnight bag. Can I stay here?" she asked, her voice hoarse from crying. I can't be at my apartment. He's there, packing. I have nowhere else to go." I didn't say anything. I just stepped aside and held the door open for her. For the first 2 days, she barely spoke. She slept in the guest room, drank the tea I made her, and stared out the window. On the 3rd day, I came home from work to find her in the kitchen, attempting to make pasta. "I'm so sorry, Amelia," she whispered, not turning around. "I was so awful. I wanted to believe him. I wanted the perfect life he promised." "I know," I said, leaning against the counter. He admitted it," she said, her voice breaking. "After you left, he admitted everything. The fake resume, getting fired, all of it. He wasn't even sorry. He was just mad that you caught him, mad that you had power." She finally turned to look at me, her face blotchy. "Aunt Susan is furious with you, by the way. She says you humiliated the family." "I know," I said again, a small, tired smile on my face. She sent me a 7-paragraph text message. "I told her to leave you alone," Chloe said, wiping her eyes. I told her you were the only one who actually told the truth, the only one who actually protected me, even after I was so horrible." "We're family, Chloe," I said. "It's complicated." "No," she said, shaking her head. "It's not. You were good to me, and I was stupid. Can you ever forgive me?" "I already have," I said, and I meant it. Seeing her there, stripped of her Instagram filters and her curated life, she just looked like my little cousin again. Chloe stayed with me for 3 weeks. We talked. We really talked for the first time in years. I told her about the merger, the stress, the pressure. She told me about her insecurities, her fear of not measuring up, and the pressure she felt to have a perfect life. As for Bryce, he showed up at Omni Group the following Monday. My friend, the CEO, told me he was a model employee. He was quiet, he did his work, which was, indeed, organizing a charity drive, and he left at 5:00 p.m. on the dot. He was a broken man, but he was a well-paid one. He was trapped in the gilded cage I had built for him. It was a fitting, quiet justice. Aunt Susan eventually stopped sending angry texts. The humiliation was complete. The family narrative had been irrevocably shattered and then rebuilt with a new, unwelcome character at the top. I was no longer poor Amelia. I was Amelia, the CEO, and they were, frankly, a little afraid of me, which I decided was a significant improvement. The resolution wasn't loud. It was the quiet, steady healing of one relationship and the necessary, firm boundary setting of others. Chloe, with her professional-level social media skills, ended up taking a new job in my marketing department. She was good at it. She was sharp, and for the first time, she was channeling her talent into something real. The family gatherings were different now. They were smaller, quieter, more honest. I had found my peace, not in their validation, but in my own unshakable truth. I had my company, I had my self-respect, and I had, surprisingly, regained a small, important piece of my family.